picture perfect until the illusion crumbled. For a long time, I thought my life was flawless. A loving husband, financial stability, and a future paved with trust. But all it took was one careless mistake to unravel everything. What I discovered beneath the facade was a truth so devastating it changed my life forever. It all began with an email. My husband, Daniel, asked me to check his inbox for an urgent message from his boss while he was driving, a small favor I'd done countless times during our 10-year marriage. The email he needed wasn't there, but another subject line caught my eye. Final confirmation. Luxury Maldives itinerary. First, I assumed it was a mistake. We hadn't planned any vacations, and our finances had been tight lately. Curious and slightly annoyed, I opened it, expecting an explanation. What I found instead made my stomach churn. The booking wasn't for Daniel and me. It was for Daniel and someone named Jessica. For a moment I froze. Surely there had to be some reasonable explanation. A work trip, perhaps, or a client event. But the attached itinerary shattered any hope of innocence. Romantic candlelit dinners, couples massages, a private overwater villa. It was unmistakably a lover's getaway. The dates matched a weekend Daniel had told me he'd be away for a conference. My hands trembled as I read further. The payment had been made with a credit card I didn't recognize, tied to a joint account I'd never been told about. That day, my mind was a fog as I replayed every interaction from recent weeks. The late-night calls, his sudden obsession with fitness, his increasing protectiveness over his phone. It all began to form a grim pattern. But the real betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was the realization that he had been using my money to fund his double life. 3 years earlier, when my father passed, I inherited a significant sum, enough to secure a comfortable future for our family. Daniel had convinced me to let him manage our finances, claiming he was better equipped to handle investments. I had trusted him completely. Now I was questioning everything. That night, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed proof, a plan, and strength. Over the following week, I became an amateur detective. Bank statements, credit card transactions, and even a discreet inquiry with a friend who worked at the resort confirmed the grim truth. Daniel wasn't just unfaithful. He was living a lavish second life with my inheritance. Exotic vacations, luxury gifts, even a leased apartment in Jessica's name. It was all there, meticulously hidden but glaringly obvious once I knew where to look. The most damning discovery came when I learned he had liquidated part of my inheritance without my consent. He had claimed it was for a long-term investment portfolio. In reality, the funds had gone into a risky venture he had co-founded with Jessica. Then came the cruelest twist. Jessica wasn't a stranger. She was someone I had once mentored at work, a woman I had supported and guided early in her career. The betrayal felt deeply personal. The timeline of their relationship stretched back 5 years, half of our marriage. With every new revelation, my pain transformed into resolve. This wasn't just about heartbreak or betrayal anymore. It was about justice. I contacted a lawyer, an old friend of my late father, who specialized in financial fraud. When I laid everything out, the hidden accounts, the unauthorized transactions, the affair, his face darkened. "This isn't just infidelity," he said. "This is fraud. He's been defrauding you." The word hit me like a lightning bolt, but it also gave me clarity. This wasn't just about me being hurt. It was about taking back control. Together, my lawyer and I built an airtight case. I froze our joint accounts, revoked his access to my inheritance, and filed a fraud claim against him. I waited for the perfect moment to confront Daniel. That moment came one evening when he came home late, reeking of a cologne that wasn't his usual. The stage was set. His favorite dinner on the table, a glass of wine poured, and a folder of evidence waiting on the table. "Rough day at work?" I asked, my voice calm despite the storm inside me. He hesitated, clearly surprised by my cheerful demeanor. "Yeah, the usual," he replied, loosening his tie. "Good," I said, sliding the folder toward him. "Because we need to talk about this." His face paled as he opened the folder. Page after page of bank statements, receipts, and emails spilled out, exposing the tangled web of lies he had spun. He tried to stammer out excuses, but I cut him off. "You've been lying to me for years. You've stolen from me. Do you even realize what you've done?" My voice was sharp, trembling with restrained fury. For a moment, he looked remorseful. Then his expression hardened. "You don't understand," he said coldly. "Jessica and I were happy. I'm sorry if that hurts you, but this was inevitable." His words left me stunned, not just for their cruelty but for their unapologetic arrogance. What he didn't know was that I had already dismantled his house of cards. While he spun his lies, I had taken every precaution. I had the evidence, the legal filings, and the financial blocks in place. "I hope you and Jessica are happy together," I said icily. "Because your little escapades end here. By tomorrow, the authorities will have a complete record of everything you've stolen from me." For the first time, panic flashed across his face. He reached for his phone, no doubt to call Jessica, but I was already one step ahead. The next day, I received an unexpected call. From Jessica herself. "I didn't know," she said, her voice trembling. "I swear, I had no idea he was using your money." Her words felt like salt in a wound, but I agreed to meet her. When we sat down, she looked like a shadow of the confident woman I once knew. Pale, makeup smudged and shaking, she confessed everything. "He told me you were a controlling, bitter ex," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He said he had to hide our relationship because you'd use it against him." Her words struck a nerve. Daniel hadn't just betrayed me. He had vilified me to justify his actions. In that moment, I realized Jessica wasn't my enemy. She was another victim. When I walked away from that meeting, I felt lighter. Not because the pain had gone, but because I knew I was reclaiming my life. Daniel's betrayal didn't destroy me. Set me free. Have you ever believed your life was picture perfect, only to discover it was an elaborate lie? That's what I thought I had. A loving husband, financial stability, and a future built on trust. But one careless moment shattered that illusion, and what I unearthed beneath the surface changed everything. It all began innocuously enough with a simple favor. Daniel, my husband of 10 years, asked me to check his email for an urgent message while he was driving. It was a routine task, the kind of thing I'd done countless times. But this time the email he needed wasn't there. Instead, another subject line caught my eye. Final confirmation. Luxury Maldives itinerary. First, I assumed it was a mistake. We hadn't booked any trips, especially not to the Maldives. Our finances had been tight recently. Curious and slightly annoyed, I opened the email. What I read made my blood run cold. The reservation wasn't for Daniel and me. It was for Daniel and someone named Jessica. The attached itinerary painted a romantic getaway. Candlelit dinners, couples massages, and a private overwater villa. Froze. My mind scrambled for explanations. A client trip, a work retreat. But the dates aligned with a conference Daniel had claimed he'd be attending. My hands trembled as I delved further into the email, uncovering payment details linked to a credit card I didn't recognize and a joint account Daniel had never mentioned. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, replaying recent interactions. His late-night phone calls, sudden interest in fitness, and the way he'd grown protective of his phone. The pieces fell into place like a horrifying puzzle. But the worst betrayal wasn't the affair. It was the realization he'd been funding his double life with my inheritance. The truth unveiled. 3 years earlier, when my father passed away, he left me a significant sum of money. It wasn't extravagant wealth, but it was enough to secure our family's future. Daniel had insisted on managing our finances, claiming he was better with money. I trusted him blindly. I never thought to question the joint accounts or the investment plans he proposed. Now I was questioning everything. That night I couldn't confront him. Not yet. I needed proof. Over the next week, I became an amateur detective. I combed through bank statements, credit card charges, and emails. A friend at the hotel mentioned in the email confirmed Daniel's booking. What I uncovered was worse than I'd imagined. Exotic vacations, luxury gifts, and even an apartment lease in Jessica's name. All paid for with my money. The final straw. Discovering he had liquidated a portion of my inheritance, claiming it was for a long-term portfolio. In reality, the funds had been funneled into a high-risk venture he co-founded with Jessica, taking control. I knew confronting him without a plan would be disastrous. Daniel was charming and manipulative, adept at twisting situations to his advantage. I needed a strategy. I reached out to a lawyer, a trusted friend of my late father, who specialized in financial fraud. As I laid out the evidence, his expression grew grim. "This isn't just infidelity," he said. "It's criminal. He's defrauding you." That word defrauding hit me like a punch. It wasn't just a betrayal of the heart. It was a calculated attack on my entire life. My lawyer advised me to gather more evidence and secure my financial position before confronting Daniel. Over the next few weeks, I froze our joint accounts, revoked his access to my inheritance, and filed a fraud claim. The confrontation. The moment finally came one evening. I'd prepared meticulously. His favorite dinner on the table, wine poured, and a folder of damning evidence waiting. When he walked in, reeking of cologne that wasn't his, I played my part. "Rough day at work?" I asked, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside. He hesitated, sensing something was off, but replied, "Yeah, just the usual." "Good," I said, sliding the folder toward him. "Because we need to talk about this." The color drained from his face as he opened it. Bank statements, transaction receipts, emails. It was all there, laid bare. He stammered excuses, but I cut him off. "You've been lying to me for years. You've stolen from me, from us. Do you even realize what you've done?" For a fleeting moment I saw remorse. But then his mask slipped, and his expression hardened. "Jessica and I were happy," he said coldly. This was inevitable. I couldn't believe his audacity. But what Daniel didn't know was that I'd already dismantled his empire. I told him as much. The frozen accounts, the fraud claim, the authorities being notified. His smug bravado crumbled into panic. An unlikely ally. What I didn't expect was a call from Jessica the next day. She claimed ignorance of Daniel's financial schemes and begged for a chance to make things right. Despite my anger, I agreed to meet. Jessica revealed she had been another pawn in Daniel's twisted game. She handed over emails, texts, and financial records, exposing the full extent of his deceit. Together, we built an airtight case against him. Justice and empowerment. The court case was swift. With overwhelming evidence, Daniel faced charges for fraud, identity theft, and forgery. He lost everything. The house, the cars, and his precious offshore accounts. But this journey wasn't just about justice. It was about reclaiming my life. I enrolled in financial literacy courses and started sharing my story. What began as anonymous posts grew into a support group, then a non-profit organization dedicated to helping women protect their finances. When Daniel was sentenced to 20 years in prison, I felt a weight lift. He had tried to destroy me, but instead he gave me a purpose. Now I stand on stages, sharing my story with women from all walks of life. Together, we're building a community of empowerment and resilience. Looking back, I no longer mourn the life I thought I had. Instead, I'm grateful for the strength I found in the aftermath, and for the freedom to write a new chapter on my terms.